On today's RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, we'll be talking rankings. We'll be talking about how sick we are of ranking tight ends and Taysom Hill in particular. I have Chris Towers from CBS joining us right now on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by No House Advantage. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Chris Towers. We are brought to you by NoHouseAdvantage.com. It is week 6, the first week of bye weeks, and a lot of dilemmas that we have this week, as we do every week. It's always a wild and crazy week. I'm here with Chris Towers from CBS, a very busy man, does football and baseball like myself. I always appreciate that you can try to balance both jobs at once. Chris, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good, yeah. Try to balance both of them. Occasionally you gotta give up one or the other, but right now we're blessedly all about football. And
yeah,
actually, I don't know, blessedly, just because I had a little existential malaise trying to go through my rankings process on Monday night. That was what you responded to with the tight ends, was just like, oh God, we really have to rank these guys. Like,
right?
We're being set up for failure. Really, is what it comes down to at the tight end position. There are so few good players that it's just. We really have to figure out where Kate Otten ranks. That's really where things are. It's unacceptable.
And I have to pick him up in leagues too. That's the worst part. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll get to it. I'm sure you've got a whole plan. So I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, it's rough right now. It's rough right now.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's rip off the Band-Aid, get the hard part over with first, and I'll be downhill from there. Let's talk tight ends. Unless you reached up, you got Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, or you stumbled into Taysom Hill one week, although there's other weeks that haven't worked out well.
Yep.
It's been brutal. Oh, Dallas Goedert's been fine. Zach Ertz has been fine. I don't want to just besmirch their good names. But we had 8 touchdowns from Kelce and Hill last week and 5 from other tight ends combined last week. It's rough out there.
I mean, even like Tyler Higbee has been pretty good for fantasy. He's got 48 targets through 5 games. He's my number 4 tight end this week, just because if you're going to get 10 targets per game, you're going to be good for fantasy. But even that, like, you watch the Rams offense, and it never seems like it's a good idea when they're passing to Tyler Higbee. It's always like nobody else can get open. He's open in the flat, so he picks up 5 yards, and that's all their offense can do right now. It kind of feels like, Najee Harris, all the targets he got from Ben Roethlisberger last season, where it was just he couldn't do anything else, really. It's a product of the dysfunction of the offense rather than anything Tyler Higbee's doing. And hey, we'll take, if he's going to keep getting 9.8 targets per game or whatever it is, we'll take that because nobody else is getting anything. But it's also like, if Van Jefferson comes back and shows anything, are they really going to keep targeting Tyler Higbee? If Allen Robinson, I think he's probably washed up, but if he can get going at all, I think Tyler Higbee's probably going to be in trouble. So it's a tough position to be in right now, where, Zach Ertz is kind of the same thing. He's got 11 red zone targets or something. I think he leads all tight ends in red zone targets. Right. Maybe not after Travis Kelce's performance on Monday night, but even that's like, yeah, but DeAndre Hopkins is coming back. That's not going to continue. Zach Ertz is going to lose a decent number of targets when DeAndre Hopkins comes back. So it's going to come down to a situation where, are there going to be 4 good tight ends?
Right.
And I mean, good is relative. I guess there are only ever 4 good tight ends, or maybe 2, but I still believe in Kyle Pitts. I just because who else are you going to start? I asked that question last week before he got hurt, before he missed the game, and I got a lot of, I'll start anyone over Kyle Pitts at this point. And it's like, well, the universe heard you. And now, if you started Mike Gesicki or Irv Smith or Tyler Conklin's the number 5 target on the Jets right now. Like, we're really going to start these guys over Kyle Pitts? So, yeah, it's a mess right now. And by the way, Tyler Conklin, top 15 tight end this week for me. Yeah. Even though he's Zach Wilson's number 5 target. That's just how bad it is.
I've got him at 10 right there.
It's awful. Yeah.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. So Taysom Hill's not a tight end. He doesn't line up at tight end. Somehow he's listed there because one coach comment in the offseason how we're doing away with the quarterback experiment there. Okay, he's a tight end, fine. All the services, I think, except for DraftKings, basically, have him at tight end. So we can gnash our teeth all we want. You can't change your league rules. I had to push in 2 of my leagues to try to disallow him to be a tight end, but he's there. He exists. But he doesn't even play that many snaps. He just had the ultimate lightning in a bottle game against Seattle. I know it's a trap, and yet he's still in my top 10 this week.
He's number 9 for me. And
exactly,
it's basically like the one thing is he's had 2 long runs. I think he had like an 80-yard touchdown in the first game, or maybe he didn't get in, but it was a long run. He had the 61-yard touchdown last week. And then he had two shorter touchdowns. I think he only has 4 red zone carries all season. I think he has 3 from within the 10-yard line. So it's not even like you can say, well, he's getting all these opportunities. It's just like he happens to have scored from 12 yards out. Right. I mean, he's a good runner, but he doesn't average 12 yards per carry, so you can't expect him to score in that situation every week. So it's really just that he's a touchdown or bust tight end, and I think his chances of scoring a touchdown are higher than Mo Alley Cox or Tyler Conklin or Kate Otten or Cole Kmet or any of the other guys behind him. But I mean, it's really it's like Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert. I think you can throw Tyler Higbee, Zach Ertz, and David Njoku there. Maybe George Kittle at this point. Maybe Gerald Everett. And maybe Hayden Hurst. And then after that, it's just a random number generator. It's just who randomly gets the Evan Ingram week 5 game where he got 7 targets or whatever and caught 6 of them, or who randomly gets into the end zone. It's a really tough spot to be in when you're trying to rank them. It's a really tough spot to be in when you're trying to figure out who to start. And it's why Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, I think they give you arguably the biggest edge on your competition you can have. That's why they're, I've argued that they're first round picks the last couple of seasons. And, it's kind of interesting. I think we're in an interesting place with fantasy football where the quarterback and tight end positions, like getting one of those elite guys right now is such a huge advantage. Josh Allen. I've got Josh Allen. I wrote a lot this offseason about how the early round quarterbacks were probably being undervalued, and you should probably make sure you're one of the first few people to take one. And I mean, all my leagues where I have Josh Allen, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those like if you started Josh Allen and Travis Kelce this year, you've got, a 15-point edge on your average opponent every week just from those positions.
It's so funny how the narrative has changed with Kelce. There, before the Tyreek Hill trade, there was a lot of talk. Kelce's not the number 1 tight end. It's a fool's errand to take him in the first round. As soon as Hill got traded, everything changed, obviously. But even for a little while, thought that the gap may have narrowed between he and Mark Andrews. And Andrews is great. You're perfectly content if you drafted Andrews in the second. So this isn't a knock on Andrews, but it's more things change, the more they stay the same. I guess the takeaway is how aggressive are you going to be on those 2? And is there a third that you're going to be like, is it wait till the 5th round on any other tight end or later? Or what's the lesson here?
We'll see what happens with Kyle Pitts. He turned 22 6 days ago. True. Like that's the point that I keep trying to hammer home is like, he's been disappointing. He wasn't that good last season. He was 20 when he made his NFL debut. He didn't turn 21 until week 5 of his rookie season. He just turned 22. Like most 22-year-old tight ends are still blocking on Saturdays. Yeah. And this guy is like, we're like, I'm finished with him. I'm never trusting him again. It's like, well, hold on. Let's see. Like, I know his situation is bad, but he's still getting a lot of downfield targets. He's still a supremely talented player. That offense is going to have to pass more than they have so far.
That's right.
I imagine they will. So, like, I still think Kyle Pitts can be a difference maker. I still think, Dallas Goedert, like, he doesn't get the volume that some of the other guys get. He's only averaging under 6 yards or 6 targets per game. But it feels like every single time he touches the ball, there's no one within 15 yards of him. Like, the Eagles are just so good at dialing up plays where he has the ball in space. He's great with the ball in his hands that I still think Goddard, like if we were redrafting, I would probably have Goddard in like the 5th round. I think him and Hill are probably the only ones that I would still view as kind of early round because we've seen like Hawkinson followed up a massive game with 1 catch for 3 yards, I think. So like I'm not trusting him. Kittle and Waller, things have been as bad as their worst detractors thought they might be this season. I'm not sure how much better things are going to get for them. So yeah, it's tough. You know, we're going to be looking at Kelsey as a 34-year-old next season and drafting him in the first round. That's going to be a little scary. There's not, you know, you're basically talking about like Tony Gonzalez as the only tight end who's ever been good at that age, but he might still be worth it. I mean, he's not really showing any signs of slowing down.
No, as long as he doesn't like take a hit in the wrong spot, basically. I kind of tend to think that's pretty bankable. So we'll see. But yeah, it's really awful. What is a good buy low trade for Kyle Pitts right now?
Ooh, good buy low trade for Kyle Pitts right now. I would try to move someone who I think has played a little over their head so far. So maybe like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I would do that. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be. I've consistently ranked him in like the 25 to 30 range this season, and week 5 was kind of the only time that it's worked out. But I think given the usage, you know, no games with, I think one game with more than 9 carries. I still think he's someone who is more like a low end RB2. I would look to move like Christian Kirk. You know, I still think he's going to be good, but given the depth at the wide receiver position, I think their production moving forward should be fairly similar. Yeah. And I'd rather have Kyle Pitts just with the upside and the edge he gives you at tight end. Allen Lazard, you know, he's someone I feel like how you felt about Allen Lazard coming into the season colors how you view him now. And like he has one game with more than 45 yards. So I was a pessimist coming into the season. So that's exactly what I expected. If you liked Allen Lazard, you're going to point to he has a touchdown or 100 yards in every game. So, you know, depending on what the person who you're trying to trade Allen Lazard to thought about him coming in, you know, that's going to color how much they value him. But if I could move Lazard for Kyle Pitts, I would do that.
Yeah. I'll throw Jeff Wilson as a possibility too, because he's coming off a really good game. Mm-hmm. The Niners clearly like him, but Mitchell will come back at some point in time. They've rediscovered Tevin Coleman's existence. I think Kittle gets involved at some point. I think this has been a worst case scenario so far, but it's also been a game flow sort of thing too. Mm-hmm. I think this is like you're offering current value now. People aren't like, oh, you're not going to get me with that Jeff Wilson trap or something like that. You might actually be able to pull that one off.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I do think Wilson, the problem is like there aren't going to be a lot of RB1 weeks for him just because he doesn't catch passes. So it's like he kind of has to get a touchdown to be an RB1, but you're going to get, you know, 80 yards from him pretty much every week. I feel pretty confident in. So, you know, that's one where it might depend on what your situation is. If you have to go from starting Jeff Wilson as your RB2 to starting Darrell Henderson, I probably wouldn't do it. But if I have, you know, Melvin Gordon, I would feel okay letting go of Jeff Wilson because I think Melvin Gordon is going to be good enough.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think the volume at least will be there. Even though Boone is going to cut into him a little bit, even though they might have other options too. We'll see about Latavius Murray. He'll probably be active on Monday night, and we'll see what he does to that mix. Could just be an ugly mess, but I do think Gordon's the main guy still, even despite all of that. We're talking rankings with Chris Towers, but before we do that, quick note from our friends on the Blue Wire Network. All of RotoWire's podcasts are hosted on the Blue Wire Network. We appreciate your indulgence in hearing their ads. Let's talk quarterbacks, because I think you kind of alluded to this earlier. Quarterbacks are just as top-heavy as tight ends, it seems like. When I was doing my rankings, I got to like 10, 11. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm really going to do this thing with Geno Smith. You know, I'm really going to – what do we think about Kirk Cousins in the Heat in Miami? I don't know. He's played one true road game all year. We'll see what happens there. I know Miami's got a really bad secondary, but the one time they played in Miami against Buffalo, they were very effective in shutting things down. I'm worried about Cousins this week.
I mean, I think even you could go a little higher. I think like the top 5 I feel really good about. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert in some order. Herbert hasn't been quite as good, but you know, I feel good about him moving forward. After that, you've got Kyler Murray, who I think will be very good when DeAndre Hopkins is back, but he's stagnated, arguably taken a step back as a passer. That offense just seems really unimaginative. Tom Brady, okay, I feel good about him. The volume the last couple of weeks has been ridiculous. He'll be fine.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow, what's the upside? If this offense can't figure out how to take the top off, teams have figured out a way to slow this offense down by playing very straightforward too high safety coverages and rushing 4. I mean, I think the stat I saw was the Ravens. It was like their lowest percentage of blitzes in like several years. They only blitzed on like 3 plays total or something. So It's just rush 4, drop 2 guys back, take the top off the offense, and they haven't figured out a way to counter that. I think they will, but right now it's really hard to trust. And New Orleans is a good defense. So
yeah, I'm with you on that.
I've got Trevor Lawrence as a top 10 guy. I've got Aaron Rodgers, who's not really playing well, as a top 10 guy. He's got 4 straight multi-touchdown games, but the upside is pretty low. So
yeah,
it's like maybe 6 or 7 guys that I feel good about at quarterback.
Yeah, and I share your angst about Burrow and then some. I am one of 3 Bengals fans on the West Coast out here. So, the offensive line isn't as bad as last year, but it's not fixed either. The Ravens played even a single deep safety at many times, and still Chase's air yards were like 50 total.
Yep.
I mean, plus they're not hitting any of these slants. They're not getting him out in the open field at all. I mean,
yep.
You take away Higgins, and it really takes a lot out of the offense there too. I mean, it makes it a lot harder. We saw Higgins with a lot of big games earlier on. He keeps getting hurt in various ways, so that's been really tough to see. And I don't think Joe Mixon has the same sort of bounce as he had last year. I think he goes down with contact a lot easier than he did in the past.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. He's dealt with a lot of injuries in his career. He's had a lot of touches. I mean, he still gets 20 touches every week.
Right.
I joked that the one drive where they had first and goal from like inside the 5 and threw 4 straight passes was like the first time Zach Taylor hasn't called a run on first down his entire career as a coach.
Right.
And so, that's another one, like a less extreme version of the Rams, where the lack of downfield playmaking has made it really, really difficult for Joe Burrow to do anything. Mixon had a ton of targets the first 4 games because they're just trying to get the ball out quickly. Last week, his targets kind of went away, and that was a little concerning for Mixon because that hasn't been the way he's been used throughout his career. So if he's going to be an inefficient rusher, and I think we're going on 4 years now of right around 4 yards per carry. So I think it's, not unreasonable to think he'll be a little inefficient.
Right.
If he's not going to get if this offense isn't as explosive as it was and the scoring opportunities aren't going to be as plentiful, it's a little worrying with Joe Mixon. I think there's the Bengals, you just kind of bet on talent.
Right.
There's so much talent there that they have to figure it out, but maybe it's more like the 9th best offense in the league as opposed to the 4th best offense like we thought they would be.
Right. Exactly. And I'm definitely very concerned. The flip side is the defense is better than I thought they'd be too. I mean, they haven't allowed a second half touchdown all year.
That's impressive.
Yeah. There's some. It's a shame that they're wasting it. I mean, this is a team that easily could be 5-0. I mean, all the things that needed to happen to lose to Pittsburgh. I mean, and that loss is looking worse and worse by the week. By the way, it's hard to get that one back. It really is, especially because post-bye, the schedule is going to be tough. Right now is when the Bengals have to make hay. I mean, they do have. I mean, the Saints this is a tough matchup on the road, but it's a winnable game. They have Carolina coming up. They've got Atlanta coming up. They got to take care of business in these games because after the break, you've got the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bucks. It's going to get a lot harder.
Yeah, that's a tough spot. And I guess the thing is, like, you can look at it both ways, right? You can look at it and say there's so much talent that they'll figure it out at some point. Mm-hmm. Or you can look at it and say, well, if they haven't been able to figure out against the bad teams or the mediocre teams, why are things going to get so much better? Like the Ravens over the past couple of seasons, since the start of the 2021 season, I believe they've given up the most plays of 20-plus yards of any team in the league. Entering Week 5, they had allowed, I think it was the most catches on passes that were thrown at least 11 yards down the field of any team in the league. The Bengals had 4 completions of 11 or more yards in Week 5. That's really, really tough to do against the Ravens have given up big plays to everyone. I mean, the Dolphins game was obviously a huge example of that, but everyone's moved the ball down the field against the Ravens the past couple of seasons. And the Bengals with, even without T. Higgins, Jamar Chase should be able to get the job done. And the fact that he hasn't been is it's been weird. His yards per catch is almost half of what it was last season.
Exactly.
I expected regression, but I mean, 18 yards to like 10.5 yards is ridiculous. It's been weird.
Opposing teams did their research. They did their studying, their planning, and the Bengals feel like they haven't counter adjusted to that yet.
There's the adjustment, and then there's the adjustment to the adjustment. And that's always the thing with young players. It's like you can catch, and it's in every sport. You can catch people off guard once. You can excel at one specific thing, but when people figure out what the adjustment to what you're doing is, the real success comes from how you adjust to that.
Yeah.
And I'm not writing Jamar Chase off by any means. He's still, I think, number 6 wide receiver for me this week, number 5. But it's been a concerning start for sure.
And the big component of contention in Cincinnati too is Zach Taylor is calling a lot of the plays, and there's a lot of argument. Maybe you shouldn't be.
It's hard to do. That's one of those things. Like when you have a coach GM or a coach play caller, it's like, man, those are 2 full-time jobs. Those are 2 more than full-time jobs. That's guys are spending 60 hours a week doing one of those jobs. Trying to do both of them is, it might just be trying to juggle with one arm tied behind your back or something.
Agreed. Another struggling team, the Rams. How can we dig Matthew Stafford out of this hole?
Get a time machine for Allen Robinson.
Yeah.
Sign Odell Beckham. I don't even know if that would help because, he's coming back from 2 torn ACLs. Van Jefferson being healthy, I think, is going to be big because it'll give them a downfield component that they just don't have right now. They just do not have anyone who can get open and make plays down the field. I mean, Tutu Atwell had a big play last week, but he's, 5'7", 125 pounds. Like you can't rely on him as a big part of the offense. Cooper Kupp is incredible. The degree of difficulty of what Cooper Kupp is doing right now, like it's unbelievable how wide open that guy still gets when they don't have anybody else you need to cover. But it's hard to come up with a game plan for how this Rams offense is going to get better when they can't really block, but I think more worryingly, they just don't have anybody who can create separation down the field except for Cooper Kupp. Tyler Higbee's getting a ton of these these short area targets where it seems like they're, I feel like the typical Tyler Higbee play this year has been like a Matthew Stafford rollout, Tyler Higbee in the flat for 5 yards. And that's like a huge percentage of his plays have just been that. And, you can move the ball down the field very, very slowly that way. But when you can't run the ball, you can't hit deep plays. Like at some point, you're going to run into problems. And that's been the Rams offense issue all season. And I don't look at that offense and the skill players they have unless Allen Robinson is just going to, rediscover his previous form. It's hard to see how this team's going to get better. I think the way they're using Allen Robinson it might just be the only way he can win at this point, which is just he can't really do much between the 20s, but when you get into the short area of the field, he can win on contested balls still and then be a red zone option, but he can't do anything else right now.
So you think this is definitely on Robinson and not like lack of time in finding him or things of that nature?
I think, it's a veteran wide receiver switching team. So maybe he just needs some time to get comfortable with with being where Matthew Stafford needs him to be, right? Like that was the big thing with Cooper Kupp last season was the relationship that they had. It seemed like there was a level of trust there, and Cooper Kupp was always where Matthew Stafford needed him to be. He finds spots in the zone. That's what he's really good at. Maybe Allen Robinson just needs some time to figure out how to play with Matthew Stafford. But we're going on, the worst season of his career last year where he looked, I think everybody was like, well, he's checked out on a bad team. He might just be a guy who the margin for error was always pretty slim because he'd never, he's not like the fastest guy in the world. He always won on contested balls. And he's great on that. But maybe it's the kind of thing where when he loses a step, he loses a lot.
Yeah.
And it's, we're going on 22 games of Allen Robinson looking like this now, or 19 games. I think he missed a couple last year, but it's been more than enough time that I think he probably has lost the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, it's kind of reminds me of like Kyle Hendricks when he loses a mile off that fastball. Where's the separation now? And it's not there. I could see that for sure. I have Stafford at 12 this week, but I could make a pretty good argument for Lawrence and Dalton being ahead of him. It's more just I don't like any of these other options. I mean, so many of these marginal plays are tough spots. Like Kenny Pickett, tons of volume. But he gets the Bucs this week. I don't want any part of that.
I mean, Russell Wilson. Would you rather have Russell Wilson, who's dealing with a shoulder injury, or Matthew Stafford, or would you rather have Carson Wentz than either of them? I genuinely don't know how I feel about that group of quarterbacks. I think, this is a situation where part of the problem is the standard at quarterback has changed, right? So like
it has.
It used to be if you got 19 points from your streaming quarterback, you were like, that's good enough. I can succeed. I can get away with that. Now, when Josh Allen's getting 30 points a game and Lamar Jackson's getting 30 points a game and Jalen Hurts is getting 30 points a game, you see that on the opposite side of your matchup, and you've got, Russell Wilson with 18, you're just getting buried. And so that's
18 if you're lucky. Yeah.
I mean, this season 18 if you're lucky. But even, Trevor Lawrence has had some good games, but he's had some real stinkers. Yeah, it's really tough. Like I said, I think there are 6, maybe 7 quarterbacks I feel good about, and Kirk Cousins is number 8. Joe Burrow's number 9. We have real reasons to be concerned about those guys.
Exactly right. Talking with Chris Towers here. Quick note from one of our sponsors, our good friends at No House Advantage. At No House Advantage, they're changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play and pick 'em contests versus other people for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all of your picks. Bet on up to 5 player prop over-unders or individual player matchups across every major league sports league, including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up with the promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com, or download the app or on the app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. All right, let's go back to talking more rankings. Let's talk running backs here. Running backs, there's the obvious pickup of the week if he's available, which he probably isn't in most leagues, at least the most competitive leagues, the deeper leagues. But I did see one league where Kenneth Walker was available. Do you empty all of your fab to go get him if that possibility exists?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the spot that we're in. There, it's always, the opportunity cost, right? When you're talking about waivers, and if I miss out, if I do that with Kenneth Walker and someone else becomes available, but who else is that going to be? Like, let's try to game it out. Who are the guys that you would rather have in a scenario where you were picking another option? If Austin Eckler was out for the rest of the season, would you rather have Joshua Kelly? Maybe. I think that's probably pretty close, just because the Chargers are such a factory for running back production. You look at Justin Jackson having big games when Eckler's missed time, but I don't know if he necessarily would get that kind of workload. You look at, I don't know, if Alvin Kamara was out for the rest of the season, Mark Ingram would probably be an RB2, but I'm not sure he'd be better than Kenneth Walker. So there aren't a lot of widely available guys where they would be obviously better than Kenneth Walker. I think Benjamin this week, if James Conner's out and Darrell Williams, I think, has already been ruled out or is expected to be, I would rather start him than Kenneth Walker. But we don't expect James Conner to miss the rest of the season, so you'd have to go with Kenneth Walker ahead of him. And so, yeah, you can come up with a handful of guys who, if the guy ahead of him gets hurt, you'd rather have them than Kenneth Walker in this situation. But the bird in the hand versus, 2 in the bush or whatever, and in this case, it's a bird in the hand versus a different bird in the bush that might be slightly better, but we don't know that. So you take the guarantee, you take, Kenneth Walker probably being, I would rank him probably 20-ish rest of season. I think I view him very similar to like Dameon Pierce, where obviously a talented player, not sure the passing game role is going to be there, not sure the offense is going to be good enough for them to get 10 touchdowns, but should be a starting caliber running back the rest of the way. So, yeah, if he's available and you're desperate and you need a running back, which most of us do, all of your fab budget, is a reasonable way to look at him if you have $0 bids. Absolutely.
How about Benjamin? If you have to make that decision tonight, you just lost Penny, or you lost Williams the week before, or like me in one league where I lost Williams and Penny in consecutive weeks. I mean, I can't miss on. I have to spend. I have to get the best available guy this week, and Walker is long gone in all but one of my leagues. I feel like I have to go a good solid 35 to 40% of my budget just to get Benjamin, who may not even start this week.
Yeah, I mean, in the leagues where waivers have already run, I think Benjamin from what I saw was more like 25%. So maybe you don't have to go, but 30% is probably reasonable because Benjamin's a top 12 running back for me right now. Obviously, if James Conner plays, that's a different question. But
right,
Benjamin, this is another offense that just produces a ton of production for fantasy running backs. They're 7th right now in total production and total PPR points by running backs through the first 5 games of the season. They've routinely ranked in the top 10 during the Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray era. They get a ton of goal line touches, even with Kyler Murray being a very good rusher. That actually opens up things in the goal line. They run that read option. Teams are so worried about getting beat by Kyler Murray in the short area. Well, that's how you get James Conner with 18 touchdowns last year. And Kenyon Drake, I think, had 15 the year before. This is just, it's a great situation. And Kyler Murray actually is one of the rushing quarterbacks who throws the ball to his running backs pretty regularly. That's part of Cliff Kingsbury's offense. So Benjamin, if he's in line for 15 carries and 5 targets this week, I think he's going to be a top 12 running back. It's a short-term ad, but with Conner, he's got a history of missing time. I think Benjamin is looking like one of the better handcuffs right now, who you probably need to stick with even after Conner comes back.
Now, I saw a note today. He's still considered day-to-day. They won't give us a whole lot more than that. The Wednesday practice is hard to get good information on anyhow, unless it's really negative news. Even Jonathan Ward is out on with a hamstring injury.
Oh, yeah. He's the only, Benjamin's the only healthy running back on their roster right now. I can't remember. They added a couple of guys to their practice squad, but they weren't.
Yeah, and they still got Keontae Ingram still hanging around too. But yeah, okay, he hasn't played yet either. So obviously they trust him so much that he hasn't even been dressed yet for a game. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm with you. I like that one. And again, the Seattle matchup's so good too. I mean, that's they
haven't been able to slow anyone down.
Yeah. It's funny that I kind of was avoiding Seattle players in the draft, and now I'm kind of regretting not having more exposure to DK and Lockett, let alone, Geno Smith even being a guy that we can use.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's so tough because Geno Smith, I think unfairly has been a punchline. Mm-hmm. I think he got drafted by the Jets, and that just doesn't work out for anyone.
Right.
And then his teammate punched him in the face, and so it was just kind of everybody wrote him off as this, joke of a player, and people were surprised that he was still around. I think, but maybe he's good. I don't know. It's such a small sample size. You don't want to overreact, but the throws that he's making, the throws that he made against the Saints last week were this was not dinking and dunking. He's throwing the ball down the field consistently. He has the highest completion percentage on passes traveling 15 plus yards down the field. He's been outstanding. There's going to be regression, but Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are really good wide receivers, especially down the field. They're both great at getting open. DK obviously great on contested catches. They're both good with the ball in their hands. It might be a much better situation than we thought. And I think they're giving up the highest. I think I saw they're giving up the highest percentage of first downs of any team in the league. So they're also, they're in a lot of shootouts, which helps.
Absolutely. Yeah. To your point on DK, I mean, I remember week 2, Justin Jefferson kind of was very quiet against the Lions. We're like, Okudah was on him a lot. Next week, DK Metcalf was getting shadowed by Okudah, and DK was owning that matchup. Just utterly destroyed him. And DK is a different type of player. I mean, he's just a physical beast. I mean, he just totally outmanned him. But the fact is, I mean, that there was not a problem in terms of, that shutdown corner. If things, and Lattimore didn't slow things down either last week either. So,
that's one that Lattimore, I mean, you just ask Mike Evans how tough Marshawn Lattimore is, especially for those bigger physical receivers. But yeah, DK and Tyler Lockett, I thought this might be the worst offense in the NFL. Granted, that was when I thought Drew Lock was going to be starting. I think Drew Lock is just bad, whereas Geno Smith might be at least decent. But yeah, this situation, it's kind of similar to Detroit right now, where they can't stop anybody. They're moving the ball very efficiently, and it might just be a situation where you just want a lot of players playing in games with the Lions and Seahawks.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Did you see the quote? Carroll today said something like, Drew Lock is still breathing down Geno's neck. Like,
I write my newsletter, the Fantasy Football Today newsletter, and anytime I mention Pete Carroll, it's always like anything Pete Carroll says, it's just, you have to take this with a boulder-sized grain of salt because he is unfailingly optimistic about every single player in public. Maybe he's not like that all the time, but anytime if you ask him about the 53rd player on their roster, he's going to make that guy sound like a Pro Bowler. It's just, it's who he is. You can't take anything he says about injury seriously because he's always going to give, Kenneth Walker, when he had the hernia surgery, I think the first quotes from Pete Carroll were like, yeah, he might be out a few days, and it's like, this is just, that's who he is, for better or from our perspective for worse, because you just can't trust anything he says. It feels a little less nefarious than the Patriots version of it, where they just it feels like the Patriots are just lying.
Right.
Whereas Pete Carroll is he's just sunshine and roses. And, on that topic, I just saw Damien Harris was limited in practice today.
Sure he was.
He probably got one half speed rep just so they could list him as limited. And, that's the thing when you do this job long enough and you're following the news long enough, you start to learn who you can and can't trust when they speak. And I don't believe Drew Lock is giving Geno Smith real competition right now.
Nope. It's kind of like Jerry Jones saying that Dak could be playing by as early as week 3. And here we are, week 6.
Or Cooper Rush might keep starting. Who knows? It's like, And in that case, Jerry Jones just wants people talking about the Cowboys.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, it's so weird to me that every week we hear from the owner about the Cowboys injuries all the time. It's always because Jerry Jones likes to talk.
Loves attention.
So do I. I mean, who am I? Podcast every week. So
yeah, exactly.
Shame on me. But anyways, before we move on, talk about a couple other good running back matchups. We have to share another note. There are 50 million fantasy sports players and sports bettors in the U.S., but 90% of all cash prizes are won by only 2% of players. That's because most sports gaming options were created for pros. The dudes dropping loads of cash on data to find an edge over the rest of us. Not Swagger. Swagger is a daily fantasy sports site created for sports fans who simply want some skin in the game and a real shot at winning. Are you tired of losing because of one bad pick? With Swagger, you don't need to be perfect to win. You simply create a ticket of 4 to 10 simple player props and score points for the ones you get right. Your score determines your win, not the perfect ticket. You can be half right and be all right with Swagger. Swagger offers the most player props and biggest payouts of any DFS site, as much as 50 times your money. Plus, you can play fantasy football along with the major U.S. pro sports, as well as international soccer, Formula One, NASCAR, fight sports, rugby, cricket, and even esports. Ready to play? Visit playwithswagger.com/RotoWire to sign up, and Swagger will give you $10 free to try them out, plus match your first deposit 100% up to $100. Swagger, daily fantasy for all fankind. We're here with Chris Towers from CBS. Chris, Cleveland, surprisingly, all of a sudden has become this ticket to the carnival that you really want to get your running backs going against. How high do you have Ramondre Stevenson this week?
So I have what I call like a stupid projections process. And when I say stupid, I mean that it's not like some fancy model with, coding and all that stuff. I have a few inputs based on Vegas totals and usage and all that stuff. And that's just kind of my baseline, just to let's level set. Let's get, I don't know what the term would be, but just like I'm completely blanking. But anyway, that's how I start my rankings process. And then I tweak from there. And when I started it and I plugged in projected usage and scoring and all that, Ramondre Stevenson was my number 1 running back this week. And I was like, whoa, okay, let's see what's going on first. Cause I also had, Benjamin as a top 6 running back initially. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, what am I missing first? And then, but with it's really just that even when the Patriots offense isn't good, they're 21st in offensive scoring right now. They're 7th in running back fantasy points in PPR scoring. This offense just routinely, I think they're the only team over the past 4 seasons to rank in the top 5 in PPR points from all their running backs. Every season, different offensive coordinator this year, same thing. We're not seeing the defined roles in the same way that we have in the past, but they're still throwing to their backs a lot. They're still running the ball a ton, second in carries overall. They're running the ball effectively, which they always seem to do. And so you add it all up against a matchup in Cleveland that, they're giving up the 5th most rushing yards right now. Teams don't have to throw the ball against Cleveland because Cleveland's never going to break big plays unless it's Nick Chubb going crazy. And so you look at it and you say, kind of a perfect situation. Ramondre Stevenson in PPR, he's my number 4 running back. I've got him just behind Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, and Leonard Fournette. And it's such a good situation. Pierre Strong might be able to play this week. Ty Montgomery is eligible to come off the IR, but I don't think he's going to. He's going to get a ton of carries. He's probably going to get 18 to 20 carries and probably a decent passing game workload too. So I think if you've got Ramondre Stevenson, things have worked out pretty well for you so far. He's been a viable fill-in. He looks like an absolute must-start option if Damien Harris misses multiple games. Again, I mentioned earlier, Damien Harris was limited. He'll be listed as questionable for this week. I don't think anybody expects him to play. I think Jacoby Myers missed 2 games with that knee injury. The initial report was he's probably going to miss a couple of weeks. He was listed as questionable every week. Of course. So that was that's what's going to happen with the Patriots.
Right.
But yeah, Stevenson looks like an absolute must-start player.
Yeah, I love him this week. I actually have him 7, but it's okay, McCaffrey versus Stevenson. Okay, yeah. No one's going to really argue with you that much, but it is a bad matchup against the Rams. But
if you have a spot where you're questioning whether you're starting Ramondre Stevenson this week, you're probably in a pretty good spot anyway. I think that's the way to look at it. It's
exactly.
If you have to sit Ramondre Stevenson this week, that means you have unbelievable options and you're probably okay either way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Breece Hall finally had his huge breakout game against last week against Miami. It was an odd game flow sort of game. Teddy Bridgewater getting hurt on the first play of the game, all the things that happened there. But nonetheless, we've seen an increasing role from him every single week. This is what you see a lot of times with rookie backs. Is it time to just kind of plug and play him every single week going forward?
Yeah, he's RB16 for me. So he's in the Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, Ezekiel Elliott kind of range. But I would start him over Elliott. I would start him over James Robinson. I would start him over Miles Sanders, just because the passing game role for both of these Jets running backs, what we saw on that 80-yard play that he had that was almost a touchdown last week, it was Carter and Hall were both lined up in the backfield alongside Zach Wilson. I think there was a play action fake to Michael Carter. Breece Hall kind of leaked out for a wheel route and he was wide open. It was a really nice play. And so, this offense leans on the running backs pretty heavily. That makes it hard to trust any of the wide receivers. I think all 3 of those guys have talent, but just not enough for them. But Breece Hall, the rushing workload that he has, he's playing about 60% of the snaps the past 2 weeks, maybe a little more than that. I really like what we've seen from Breece Hall. I think he's an exceptionally talented player, and I don't think he's going to give these snaps back to Michael Carter, who's pretty good in his own right, by the way.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are worrying about Carter vulturing the end zone carries there, the red zone carries. I'm not too much. It's kind of funny because Carter was the guy that was seeding the red zone carries last year.
And at least one of Carter's touchdowns came immediately after that 80-yard play for Breece Hall, which you see that regularly. Deandre Swift, there was a couple of situations earlier in the season when he was healthy where, it was worrying that Jamal Williams was getting all of the goal line carries, but it was because at least on 3 different occasions, I think Deandre Swift had a huge play where he was down inside the 5, and guys tend to come out after that. Maybe Christian McCaffrey doesn't, and Saquon Barkley doesn't, but pretty much everyone else comes out after those plays.
Yeah, happened with Eckler last week after the 71-yard run. Absolutely. Exactly. Happens all the time. Who's a guy that normally you'd start that you think is a bad start this week? It can be running back or receiver.
So I don't know if James Robinson's in that spot at this point. He might just be out of the normally I'd start him, but obviously based on the first 3 weeks, we looked at him as someone who, we thought, yeah, this guy looks like a must-start running back. And then I think it's so hard. I don't want to be mean, but even on the 50-yard touchdown run you watched, and it was like, this guy's not moving that fast. It's just like the defense just way overcommitted, and there was nobody there to chase him down. And so I think he's in that spot where you probably sit him. I think, I mentioned Alan Lazard as a sell candidate for Kyle Pitts. He's someone that I generally am pretty skeptical about starting. I think, my preference would be to not start any wide receivers in the Jets or Packers game. And so that would include Alan Lazard. And I'll say Jalen Waddle, just because of the situation. It does sound like Skylar Thompson's going to start for Miami. I think Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are both the kind of players who only need one play to be worth starting in your fantasy lineup, so it's always hard to go away from them. But Thompson looked pretty overwhelmed in week 5, obviously going in cold as the number 3 option 2 plays into the game or whatever it was. That's a tough spot for any rookie, let alone a 7th-round pick, but it makes Jalen Waddle a lot harder to trust.
I agree. I do have Waddle in a couple places. Started to kind of shy away from him because he had that mysterious leg injury in the last couple of weeks. So last couple of weeks of draft season, I stopped taking him, but I had him a lot of early drafts. And it is a dilemma on that one there. I got a general dilemma question for you, but we got to do one more bit of reading, one more read first, and then we'll hit that up. But football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for. And college football is that's more your speed. They've got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com, and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. I'm here with Chris Towers from CBS. And Chris, we talked about the Dolphins and, Skylar Thompson getting the start here this week, most likely. An issue I think that's made it harder for us is the concussion issue. I mean, we've been clamoring for teams to take things seriously. We saw what happened with Tua. We also saw what happened with Teddy Bridgewater, where he signaled that he was okay. And it had a huge impact on the game, had a huge impact on our leagues. I'm finding it's really difficult to rank some of these guys with the concussions and knowing exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the high-profile nature of Tua's injury was always going to lead to some kind of change in how teams approach things, whether it's, the official changes that we saw or teams just generally being a little more cautious with these situations. It's an impossible question to answer, right? The concussion question, and it's not just an issue in the NFL. A lot of people are, laser focus on the NFL because it's the most obvious place where concussions are an issue. It's a contact sport, but you look at European soccer. You look at
exactly what NBA. I was thinking of. Yeah,
I remember there was consecutive games in the NBA playoffs, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. George Hill suffered an obvious concussion, was cleared to go back into the game, and I think Harrison Barnes, it was the next night, landed on his head, got taken to the locker room, and then was cleared to play, returned, and then taken out. And so it's these situations where the guys want to play. It's not like you can have the doctor, when they rupture an Achilles, the doctor can rub the back of their leg and okay, yeah, there's some damage there. It's, they're not going to be walking with a limp most of the time. So it's a situation where there's probably no good answer for how you approach it. The guy stumbled, so you take him out of the game. Well, in some cases, it might just be a guy stumbled for a different reason. We still don't know with Tua. They say it was the back injury. What was that real or we just don't know. So it's a situation where you're always going to be looking at imperfect answers to the question of how you handle concussions, who gets taken out of the game, when they're cleared to play. Sometimes concussion symptoms don't come into effect until later. Sometimes you have a couple of hours or a couple of days even. I've seen situations where guys took a big shot and didn't get diagnosed with a concussion until 2 days later. Yeah. So it's just the NFL is to a certain extent making things up as they go along, and teams are reacting to public outcry. And I think the way I look at it though is there are probably going to be more situations where teams err on the side of caution, which probably isn't a bad thing. But from our perspective for fantasy, it's going to create situations like Miami where maybe Teddy Bridgewater didn't need to go out of that game. But now Miami's probably going to be without their top 2 quarterbacks 2 weeks in a row just because, as Mike McDaniel said this week, he would rather start Skylar Thompson, with a full week of practice than Teddy Bridgewater, who can't be cleared for contact even in a best case scenario until Friday. And so, it's tough. I don't unfair. I don't know if that's the right word. I know a lot of Dolphins fans are upset about it. It just kind of, it is what it is, and it's bad luck. And when you err on the side of caution, there are probably going to be situations where guys get caught up in the protocol who don't need to be. But I would feel, maybe this is just, it doesn't matter how I feel, but I would feel more comfortable watching games knowing that they're erring on the side of caution, even if it's, in some instances, maybe reactive or performative or whatever word you want to use.
For sure. And of course, the Dolphins are going to be under greater scrutiny than any other team in the league right now. So there is that. We've got a number of guys that are in that boat. We've got Chris Olave. We've got Pat Freiermuth. Isaiah McKenzie could miss a second week here. It's entirely plausible. We have seen players miss 2 weeks.
Freiermuth is worrying because he did have 2 concussions last year. Didn't actually end up missing any games with them. But, once you start, it's the kind of thing where once you start seeing multiple concussions, they, 1, tend to come a little easier, and 2, the effects tend to be a little more harmful the more concussions you have. So that's always a concern.
Yeah, I coach youth sports, and we see that in youth soccer all the time. Kids bump heads. It happens. And especially the younger they are, you got to be watching that even more closely. So it's a tricky issue there.
Absolutely.
So you do your rankings every week. Where can people find them?
The best way to do it would be the CBS Sports Fantasy Football Today newsletter. That's kind of my main goal during the fantasy football season. I also host the Fantasy Football Today in 5 podcast, which is we say 5 minutes. It's usually more like 7 minutes. We're trying to get the news and everything you need for the day in as small a format as possible. But cbssports.com/podcast, cbssports.com/newsletters. Fantasy Football Today newsletter goes out, I think it's 8 times a week, every day but Saturday. We get 2 on Sunday and Wednesday. So, make sure you subscribe to that. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys do it for multiple sports. I notice, you've always been great on baseball as well. I think that's where we first started connecting. But, I like that you're also like a fan. You're a sports fan, a generalist, and, you play whatever's in season. I love that. I don't
even root for my own teams anymore at this point, really. I'm a fan of a few teams. I'm a Marlins fan, but that's mostly just because I feel like I don't deserve anything better. But for the most part, I just like watching sports. I don't don't necessarily even have the rooting interests anymore. I hope everyone has a good time. Is what I'm rooting for.
Nice. And some people they focus strictly on their fantasy teams. I'm a Reds fan. And when the team betrays you as badly as they did, it makes it hard. It becomes the old Seinfeld bet you're rooting for laundry eventually.
Exactly. That's exactly the case with the Marlins.
Yeah.
4 different times now.
Yeah. And it's just, it's really, really difficult. But then you get a run like the Bengals had last year, and you're like, oh yeah, this is why I stay a fan. And you get rewarded. But it's so few and far between, especially when you root for traditionally downtrodden teams. You don't have these built-in advantages. Yeah, it's easy to be a Dodgers or a Yankees fan, or
every Boston sports team in the last 20 years.
Exactly right. So it goes. Chris, awesome stuff. Appreciate your time and great insights as always. We'll do that again next year.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. Chris Towers, everybody. We're going to take I'm not going to take a break. We're going to sign off for today, but coming up tomorrow, we got Mario and John. Thanks for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast.